Good morning, my name is Lee Mallon and this is Module 4 on the AI for Environmental Educators mini course. In this module, we're going to talk about talking to data and why that's so important, and also like how do we even go about it. So let's get started. So first of all, I just want to kind of cover a few bits of terminology that will be important. So the first is context window, then we'll lead into RAGs, analysis, and custom. Now, context window implies when you're talking to one of these large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it may be, there is only a certain amount of information you can send to it and get back from it within what is called the context window. If you want to send in 100 words and you want to then have a conversation with it, which is say 50 words, and then you want 200 words out, then you need to have a context window of 350 words. Now, context window is accessible in different models, and it ranges from 1,000 tokens. That's how it's defined. A token is a syllable of a word, but for this purpose, let's just say it's a word, 1,000 words, all the way up to Google recently released Gemini, its ChatGPT equivalent model at 1 million words or 1 million tokens. Now, why this is important is if you use ChatGPT 3.5 today, you'll be working with roughly about 8,000 tokens. And it's important because if you send in a document or a bit of text you want to analyze, and then you want to output the equivalent size, you just need to be careful with this context window, because what will happen is it will basically condense the stuff you've sent in and maybe lose some of the context of the question. Now, the context window and why it's important is because of cost. That's the main thing. If you've got a Google system with 1 million tokens, I'm sure the answer should be, let's just all use that. Of course, there is more compute being actioned when that happens, and therefore the inference also can take a bit longer to execute, so you don't get your result back as immediate as you would with, say, a 8,000 token window. So these things are just something we have to balance out with these two things. Now, the reason, or not the reason, I guess, the byproduct of this, like with the beginning we had low context windows, and also then the cost prohibition of having like 1 million tokens. We don't want to be sending an 80-page document to the API every time we ask it a question. So this idea called RAGs came along. RAGs stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what it means is we want to send information to the language model that is the most relevant to the question we're asking, so that it doesn't have noise, and also it means we can shrink that context window. So what happens is, let's say you provide a 100-page document. Instead of it sending that 100-page document every time you ask a question, it will basically look at that document and split it up into chunks. Let's just say pages, so into 90 pages. And then if in that document, let's say 20 pages were about air quality, 20 pages were about climate action, and the remainder was around sewerage, and your question is around climate, then it will just go, right, I'm going to grab them 20 pages, and anytime there's a request, I'm just going to send them 20. Which then obviously massively reduces the compute by, let's just say, 1/5 on that information being processed. Now, RAGs is great. It is, in my opinion, a little bit of a hack, and hopefully it'll improve over time. But also, I think the context window and the inference problem will slowly go away. There's a great chipset been announced, or that's been worked on for a long time, called Grok, and it's been able to infer inference executions by 10 times faster, and also at 1/10 the energy consumption, which is great for environmental needs. Now, let's just assume we've now got information, we can ask it questions. We now have this idea of analysis. Now, what I mean by this is these language models are very creative. Their reward mechanic in their code is to give you an answer. So you'll ask it a question, even if it doesn't know, it will come up with something. And sometimes it's quite convincing and believable. Now, if you want to ask it a question about something that is factually important or resolves around data, it's not like write a blog post or create a poem or something like this, then you want a bit of reassurance that the answer is going to be what you intended it to be. And this is where we now need to start looking at this thing called data analysis. And I'll give you a demo shortly of how this works in ChatGPT, where when you ask your prompt, if it thinks it falls into this category, then instead of it giving you an answer, it will write the code and then execute the code to give you the correct answer. And then I'm just going to wrap this up with this idea of customs. So custom, there's a lot of different names. People call them GTPs. Personally, I call them doppelgangers. This is where we want to wrap up the idea of some information, and we want to wrap it up with a personality, a bit of context, and then I can just talk to that thing about that subject, giving it a bit of a narrower scope. And that's what it means by custom. Again, I'll show you an example of that in ChatGPT. So let's go to a demo. Okay, so here we are in ChatGPT. We're going to use 3.5 to start off with. 3.5 is the one that everyone will get if you access the free account. You can upgrade to ChatGPT 4, which gives you access to image generation, browser integration, and the data analysis stuff I spoke about, though it has a limited of 40 messages per 3 hours. And 3.5 is good for quite a lot of things. So let's start off with just asking, for those who aren't familiar with ChatGPT or these models, let's just start off with some simple stuff. So for example, I can say, what is the capital of the UK? Here's London. Okay, give me 10 facts about London. And then it's starting to write, and I'm like, okay, cool, that's great. And the speed of which this is happening is very impressive with 3.5. It's very quick. Now, create a blog post based on those facts, but only the first 5. So what I'm saying is now generate this blog post, but only pull in the first 5. So it knows that ordering of the list of items. Okay, there we go, great. Now give me a tagline based on that blog post. Okay, now from this point here, all the way back up to here, this is our context window. Every time I send a message and a question about London, all this information is being sent back, this whole context window. Okay. Now, that's great, but what about for information? What if we're wanting to do like the data analysis thing I spoke about? What if I'm wanting to interrogate some environmental information? So let's jump into GPT-4 so we can get that data analysis. And let's ask the question of what has been the average temp in London for the last 36 months? Now, what we're going to see here is it's now thinking. So it's kind of going, do I have this information in my kind of language base? Or is this something I have to go off to get from something else? And it's kind of come back and it's gone, okay, I can kind of come to some representation of this, which is great. And then I can say, okay, give me the raw values for the last 6 months. Okay, and then I can say return these results, and I can stop it halfway through because it knows the previous context. So when it runs again, it will have that, it'll know I was asking for 6 months before. Return these results in a CSV, right, in a CSV file. Now, what we're going to see happen now is it's going to think. Now, it knows it can't create a CSV file for language. So what it has to do is it has to write some code. So here it's writing the code to generate the CSV file in question. And then once it's wrote the code, it's going to execute that code and then provide me with the file to download. Okay, and I'm going to click this, and then, so that's what it then generated and gave me in a CSV file. Now, let's say, so that's great, so that's cool. And now let's say I want to investigate some information. I've got some information I want to actually conversate with. And I can attach files, I can attach images, all sorts of things. So here I'm going to get, here's a UN report on air quality. What is this? So that's going to give me an overview of what this report's about. And I'll be able to ask it follow-up questions. So I can say, give me, so let's just stop that. Give me the top 5 points in bullet list. Okay, I can continue on. I can have this conversation. I can chat. I can ask it to return stuff in a visual format. I can ask it to do it in a rap, in a poem. And again, we'll get to this in a later module. But as you can see, it's extracting information from that PDF. And that's great. And let's say I find this really valuable and interesting. What I can do then is then linking into the custom side is they have this concept called GTPs. And I can create a new GTP. And I can call it the UN report on air quality, if I could spell. And then I could upload the report. And I can give it some instructions. So I can say what this does, like what do I want this GTP to be? Like, you are a report on air quality from the UN Environmental Programme. And off the back of that, I can then please answer questions in UK English, for example. And then I can test it. So I can have a little, I can have a chat to it. So I can say, tell me about what Europe is doing on air quality. Ooh. And it's going to go into that data, look for it, send it to the model, dissector it, and then basically give me this answer accordingly. And it's pulling out information from the report that I'm aware of. I've seen these sections. Then I can create this. What I can do is I can publish it to the store so anyone can access it with a ChatGPT premium account. I can make it only available to me, or I can just create it with a link. And now I can share this GTP. And that means that anyone who, if I go to view now, anyone who wants to add it, I can give them that link. And then where they would normally just chat to GTP, instead they can now have this UN report on air quality in their feed, and they can have a conversation with that data. I hope you enjoyed this module. The next module will follow on generating text. Thank you.